How you doing, everyone? Welcome back to another video. Just before we get started, I just wanted to mention that if you're joining our Discord group, we'll be actually creating a people squad. So we're going to vote on certain players and certain trades each week, and we're going to make a team for everyone involved in that Discord group. So please join that Discord link in the description, and we'll get started from there. But in today's video, we're going to be going through a Q&A. So I've got a bunch of questions here. We're going to go through those in a fair bit of detail and a little bit more than I would in just a post just texting there. So we're going to start off. Our first one's going to be Marty Taupau or J Trob is a question I've got. So what you've got with Trob is someone that is 746k, priced at 56, and is a very consistent scorer. He had a fairly slow start compared to his average, was just under in the low 50s, and then had a bunch of games there where he did really well to then have a leaner spot at the back end of the year. But he's someone that's only going to fluctuate within the sort of 50 to 80k range, up or down. And he's someone that you can lock in for the entire year, only missing those 2 games over Origin. Someone that plays those 80 minutes, so you're really guaranteeing him to get that 55 average. If you look at Marty Taupau, he's slightly different at 665k, so pretty much 100k difference. Priced at 50, and his minutes are a little bit lower. So Marty, with him, he has a game last year, where he only had the 8 minutes and then had a 39 off the interchange and then back to normal. So you can see that there's a slight bit of upside with another game on the interchange as well, whereas Trob, he had all games pretty much at 80 except for one at 70. So just based on that, he's slightly underpriced, a few points underpriced just with those games, but there's a chance that he plays a couple extra minutes. There's also a decent chance that he doesn't. But if you're looking at these guys together, if you're just looking at a price to price, then Marty Taupau is going to be a slightly better option for your team, just given the fact that he shouldn't have a floor any lower than 50, but there's a chance he averages 55 for a 5-point upside. But that's my thoughts on that one, guys. Next one I had was, we've got Tom Trob out for 4 weeks. Who's going to be a good option to change him to? And there's going to be a few things that come into play with this one. If we actually go into that position in the wing fullbacks, he's someone that's obviously a gun, has been a gun in the past, and there's a chance that he was going to go back up into that status, into maybe a little bit closer to this range, with him having an average of close to 50 in his 80-minute games. But you got a few options. You can go right to the tippy top in someone like Tedesco, but it's obviously 400k extra, and that would be a really good option. He's someone that you want to keep in your team for the entire year, because we're all going to want to try and bring Teddy in at some point in the year. Pong is obviously out, but then you've got this grouping here. Edwards is a decent option, but is a little bit injury prone. He shouldn't have much upside from his 50 average, but he's someone that you could bring in. Someone like Brimson or Pappenhausen and Sheck, I feel, have a little bit of upside. Could possibly average somewhere closer to 55. So they're a really cool option I think you could upgrade to. And then from there, there's not too many in the middle position there, around that 400, 500k, as you can see here. Gagai has a decent average, a slightly better average, closer to 45 if he plays in the centres. But Val Holmes, a chance he plays in the wing. There's a chance Latrell Mitchell, goes better and averages around 40 or just above that. You can see here Trbojevic is, his average from last year was 39, even with those games. But around this price point, there's not too much. You've got someone like Staines, who's a little bit of a gamble. Same with Moses Mbai. We're not sure where he's going to play. Corey Allen has a little bit of upside, but I don't see him as a keeper. There's a few more questions in these sections where that these guys up the top are going to be your top line guns, but it's just going to depend on who you've got in this position as well. If you've someone that's spent up a little bit already, you've got a Tedesco and maybe a Pappenhausen, then I'd probably suggest spending this last spot where you would have had Trbojevic going back down to a cheapie that might be named at the start of the season. So you've obviously got guys like Moylan, Tex Hoy, Dane Laurie, these type of guys that might be a half decent option in your side. But yeah, that's my general thoughts, guys, and let me know what you think about that going forward. You got Hopper Whitey, these kind of guys that are just under 400k that aren't too much of a risk, just because you're not giving putting a lot of capital into your team. But if you've got a couple of cheaper guys in here, then I'd suggest spending up a bit bigger. So they're kind of the options that I'd want to look at with Tommy Trob. We'll move on to the next one. So have 600k spare for any player. Who would you bring in? So let's just go to all positions. This is the easiest way to work this out, and we go down to 600k and have a scroll from there. So let's just say from Katoa under that. I'm going to scroll down. Someone like Foran I wouldn't be thinking about. The first one I'm half interested in is someone like Adam Elliott. In his games where he's played big minutes, apart from injury, he's averaged over 50. So he's someone that has a little bit of upside. Garner spent some time on the interchange last year, and it looks like he should be getting that starting spot now with Bloor out, but how long will that last? That's going to be the question. You got people like Bradman Best, who is going to be a keeper in the centres, but I wouldn't be wanting to spend too much money for a gun centre right now, especially with a little bit of value in there with guys like Avarillo, Roberts, Jack Bird, these type of guys. Mitch Rain's a fairly decent option in the fact that if he gets close to 80 minutes, which might not happen with Tanner Boyd and these type of guys on the bench, but he's a decent option for you. There's a lot of guys that just are natural at scoring a 40 and won't do anything crazy for your squad. Dufty, Gray, and these type of guys who are pretty much at their peak. You got someone like Tino who's a really cool option and probably has my personal thoughts are about 7 points upside. So this is how I'd look at it. If it's for any player in particular, I'd be just scrolling down here and shortlisting a bunch of guys that you think are going to be a really good option for your side. Someone like Ewan Aiken's going to be a good option in the centres, and you can go from there. And there's obviously a lot of guys in this sort of price range because that's the range that's very normal scoring. You know, if you're playing 80 minutes as a back or a half, then an average of about 40 is pretty standard. You then have guys like Luke Brooks who are going to be a decent option, average at 40 and have previous year averages of just over 50. So they're really cool options. I think someone like Brooks is going to be probably your best choice around that number, and then you come up right to the top, and you know guys like Mitch Rain, and then the forward. So yeah, you can tell that I'm going for guys that have a little bit of value in the forwards, hooker, and the half position there because they're a little bit more consistent than the guys in the wing fullback and the center. Next question is going to be: do you think 3 to 4 hookers is good to start with? All right, so let's have a bit of a think. So let's just say we're going to have a top line hooker here. We have someone like a Brayley, a Little, and then maybe a Connor Watson, which could start in the mid, but you have him on the bench here. So let's just pretend they're on the bench and you've selected some big dogs up in the middle section. You got 3 hookers on the bench. Okay, they all cover that position. Let's just say Watson you got as well, so you can cover the mid position. Great, you cover 2 positions. This is what we want to be thinking about. Can your bench cover one of your starting players if they get injured for 1 week, or if they get suspended for 1 week? There's a bunch of options there that could happen to one of your main guys in the starting squad, and this is what you want to be thinking about. So you got the 3 hookers there. You covered mid, hooker. You'd like to have someone covering one of your halves because you know if you've got someone like Brooks and he happens to get injured for a week, you still think he's got upside, right? So you don't want to trade him out. And if you don't have a player on your bench that you could cover him with, then you're going to have to trade him out and you're just wasting trades and you probably want to bring him back in as well. So you're looking to have a half, an edge, a centre, and a wing fullback. So you've got 4 spots to cover there with 5 players. Okay, and a lot of the time the value is going to be in those middle forwards that are coming off the bench, and you know they're priced very low, but might get 30 minutes and close to 30 points for a 10 point or so upside. So I'd say you'd have a couple more mids and maybe an edge. So just think about that. If you've got 3 hookers on your interchange, then make sure you have cover in the majority of the positions. It might end up being the fact that you only have might not have a positional cover in the centers, for example, or a wing fullback, and you might have to change one of those guys. But around in those cheaper positions there's going to be a bunch of options there. So that's generally my thoughts around the bench. But your hooking position is going to be one of your better money makers, which we saw last year was one of the best spots with guys like Api Coruscant who you could start with, who turned out to be top line keepers. So that's something to think about. The hookers and mid players are going to be the ones who are going to make you a bunch of money, and I think that they're really important to have on your bench as scorers, but also as the money maker. All right. Next question we've got here is: I don't think Cleary is a good option to start with. I feel like he's overpriced, so I'm going to be starting with Munster and Brooks. Yeah, sure. We can say that he's overpriced, but is he? Like when you actually think about it, he averaged 73 for a reason, right? He averaged close to 70 the year before that. He is one of the better players in the game, obviously the best player in fantasy right now. But he's the next best scorer in the game. Sorry, he's the best scorer in the game by 8 points right now, from 64.6 to 72.6. If you bring him in your team, you have him as captain, you're paying for what you get. Is he going to average less than that? Look, there's a chance, but he averaged 72.6 across the season. He's going to have some games where he scores 55 or 60, but he's going to have games where he scores 100. So with him and all the guns in general in your team, you're picking them for their scoring. You're not picking them to make money. If you don't pick him up, and he could average 100 over the first 3 games. He could have 300s in a row. He could have 110, a 90, and a whatever. He could also have a couple of games of 60s, and yes, he might lose 100k over that time, and you can pick him up. But what if he doesn't? It's the same with someone like Teddy. You bring Teddy in with an average of 63. He could go 30, 30, 30, and beautiful. You bring him in at a very cheap price, but he could also get 100 and 100 in the first 2 games, and then those coaches that didn't have him at the start are really on the back foot. So I don't see him as being a gamble. Obviously, it's a lot of points you have to get each week, and I completely understand that. But when he's the best fantasy player by 8 points, then there's a really good chance that you should bring him in and start with him. And you can see he's owned by 33.5% of teams, and the majority of these are going to be teams that know what they're doing. So if you aren't starting with him and you're going to be captaining someone who's a 60-point average player, you're already 12 points behind the 8 ball. Obviously, they have to play and have to score well, but that's what I think with someone like Cleary, if you're going to be bringing him into your team. And our last one, guys, is it stupid to start with gun wing fullback? So basically, is it stupid to start with a lot of money down here in this bottom section? And I don't think it's stupid. What you want to be looking at in a team is where the value is. And so if there's a lot of value up top in the hookers, mids, and edges that are going to score, so if you've got a 30 to 35 point player who's like from average last year, who's going to be scoring closer to 50, then why not have a bunch of those players in? Obviously, we're not exactly sure, and you've got to pick the right ones, because we had issues last year with the Jack Williams and Liam Knight, these type of guys that we thought were going to do well, but they didn't have much pedigree. When you've got players like Watson who have a little bit more game time, or who have played multiple games in that position and know that they'll do well when they get the certain minutes, then that's a different story. But we can see a few of the guys at the moment have played sort of 2 to 3 games in that position, and we're like, yeah, they're going to be amazing. If we're talking like guys like Davey, Ford, these types of players here, Gilbert when he was not injured. But if that's where the value is, then I'd be selecting value in there. If there's no value or cheapies in the wing fullback position, then what are you going to do? You're going to put like a Bailey Simonson and someone in your team. I don't think that's a very smart option. So it might be better to spend up a little bit, especially with Trbojevic out. Then it might be smart upgrading him and having, even if you're having two like those mid-tier guns, like a Pappy and a RTS or a Dylan Edwards, these type of guys that are going to be more consistent in your team. Just think about your mindset when the season started. So you do all these trades, change your team a million times beforehand. The season starts, you one of your average sort of 400k wing fullbacks doesn't go that well. Let's think Corey Allen, for example, or Will Hopewade, these type of guys. They come in and they score a 20 first game, probably thinking about rage trading them already. If they have two games in a row, one gets 20, the next he gets 25, when his average is meant to be 30 to 35, and you're like, yeah, he's going to make money, and he hasn't, then there's a great chance that you trade him out. The next few weeks he gets 70, and you're hating fantasy and ready to delete the game. So that's where these top line wing fullbacks who are a little bit more consistent just are much easier for your brain to handle. And this is the reason why we like to select guns across the whole paddock as well. Because when the season starts, you're really stressing when a player doesn't score well. And that's why someone like a Trbojevic, which we spoke about at the start, is so nice to have. Tamalolo, Cameron Smith, always, having him as rule one as captain was always great to have, just because he knew that they were going to score well, and they might have their low game of the season is a 48 or 50, and you can cop that and go, yeah, that's fine, because the next week they might score 75. So something really interesting to think about. It's cool going, oh yeah, I'll just pick all these mid-tier guys, and then if they have a couple of bad games, you just want to rage trade them, and that doesn't work out for your team. So there you go, guys. That's this video. Please subscribe so you can see more videos, and hit that like for the YouTube algorithm. I really appreciate that, guys, and I hope you enjoyed that one. We'll see you in the next one. See ya.